What can you share with us about how those experiences translate somehow, perhaps in your work?
It's a long time ago now. When I come back to New York, it's always strange to see how it has changed and how it's really another city today. But I think that what I learned most when I was here was about script writing and about directing actors. And not really because the teachers were special. It's just, when you travel, and that's what I try to tell in L'Auberge Espagnole. I don't know if you saw that movie about European, studies exchange. Where when you go to another country, it's not the school where you learn most. It's more about learning a different culture and learning a different language. And it's true that the difference between the French culture or the French way of making movies and the American way, I think the American way is more about facts and about situations. And I think that we deal more with ideas in France, and that's why probably the movies are more intellectual oriented or more intimist in France, and the American movies are more oriented with action movies or comedies that are very factual. So I think there's a big difference with that, and I had a hard time when I was here because I had to learn how to really make a script where ideas are not the beginning of a story, but if you're lucky at the end there are ideas in a movie. And what makes the script working is to put one action after the other, and same thing for the actors. When you're talking to an actor, you don't say psychological words, or you don't say philosophical words. You just say sit here and lean down, and if you only talk with action words, then an actor can really understand much more what you're talking about. So it's really a question of translating your ideas, the things that you have in mind, into what actions I'm going to say in the scripts and into an actor. So I think that's really what I learned in New York.
When you prepare for a film, does it matter if you are preparing a film for a French audience as opposed to an American audience?
No, because I think that when you make a movie, you make it for an audience in general. You don't know if you're going to show the movie to an old audience or a young audience, but it's true that it varies when you show a movie like this one. You don't really know. It changes in every country. For example, I showed it in China, and in China they don't have brothers and sisters, and so you don't know that. Well, I didn't. I knew that they have only single children, but because of that, the movie is so much talking about brother and sister or brother and brother that. Of course, the way of receiving the movie is very different in China just because of that. So you can't really plan that, and but they can be as emotionate with the movie because of that, because then they realize that they're missing this kind of...
There's still a human connection.
Yeah, right, yeah. So even though there's a different culture and, a different way of life, then people receive it differently, but you translate your emotions into something else.
Sure. Well, let's speak about the film we just watched. How did you find your way to the project, and what inspired you to make this film?
I wanted to make a movie with different characters, and I wanted to make a movie more about Paris, because it was just after L'Auberge Espagnole and Les Poupées Russes, which were movies made in Barcelona, and Russian Dolls was made in London, in St. Petersburg, in Russia. And I had a feeling I was shooting a lot of cities all around Europe, and I didn't make a movie really about my city, and I really like to make portraits of cities. So I really try to focus on my city, and also I think that I was really influenced by Altman, because I think he's really the inventor of how to make a movie with different characters, how to make a movie with different stories, and I wanted to go through that, and so that's really what led me to tell a story about Paris. And I knew it was hard to make a story like that, because then you're always afraid with that type of narration that you're going to lose the audience because you have too many stories to follow. Or but formally, that's what I wanted to experience, because I think that modern life is really deals a lot with. Do you say zapping in English? Zapping, when you go from one channel to another when you watch.
Oh, surfing.
Surfing, yeah. But I have a feeling that modern life deals a lot with the fact that you're talking to someone, then your mobile rings, and then you're talking to someone else, who's in another country, and then you're watching TV at the same time, and you have like interactions with different people, different stories, and the internet pushes that even more. So I think that now also with TV movies, I think that people are used to follow different stories at the same time. So I think that probably the audience is more used to that kind of narration now, because modern life deals with that. So that's really what I wanted to experience.
Pre-production, did you have a lot of rehearsals? Were you did you try to direct her about what your feelings were about the character, or did you just throw it out there and allow her to explore that on her own? And not just Juliette Binoche, I mean all the actors. I mean,
well, very often I work very differently from one actor to another, because some need to work a lot, and Fabrice Lucchini needs to have a lot of lecture. Mm-hmm. We read a lot the script, we talk a lot about the script together, and Juliette, she wanted to keep a freshness, and I think that with many actors I have a tendency not to rehearse too much, because it's really a combination of work in order to prepare things. With the baker, for example, her part was very musical, and she's very talking, like, she has her own music, and she had to rehearse a lot in order to have the right pace, and her part was really about rehearsing. With other characters, the freshness was more important than the rehearsing. So it's always really a combination between knowing a lot something or not knowing, because then you're going to throw people against each other, and then you're going to get something fresh.
There's also in our film library a number of films directed by Cédric Klapisch as well. So if you're interested in that, I'll let you know. But speaking about from a technical perspective, we mentioned the actor-director relationship. I'd like, if you can, because you were, and probably still are in some ways, a cinematographer. You've been a cinematographer. Mm-hmm. So when you sit down with your cinematographer, Christophe Boca, yeah. Does that cinematographer in you come out? Do you try to speak to Christophe as a cinematographer? Do you try to push that down a little bit with regards to telling the visual structure of the story?
Well, movie making is a really collective sport. So every time it's a dialogue, when you have a script writer, you have to talk with that person. When you have an editor, you have to talk with that person. And it's not only you deciding what to do, it's always a discussion of different talents. So when you choose the person, then you choose someone you can relate to, someone you can talk to. So that's what I felt when I chose Christophe Bocan. He's a young DP, I can say, but I knew he was able to do different things, and I knew that in this movie I needed some lighting that was very contrasted. So very often there's a lot of black in the frame because of the tone of the movie. We chose to shoot the movie We started in November, so it's really when the fall begins in Paris, and when it's really raining, grey, and then during the winter. So it was really a fall and winter shooting on purpose, because we wanted to have that kind of feeling and lights in Paris. Because Paris during the summer or during the spring, it's a completely different city. So it started with that, and then we had discussions in general about the look of the film, and then really precisely every day about every shots. And I have a monitor, and I participate about the framing of every shot. So, but it's really about getting along, because I made another movie which was a gangster movie with the DP that made Amélie Poulain, and it was always a fight with him. And so it's at the end, you know, the picture is really great, and I really love what he did. It's called Neither For Nor Against. You know, I don't know if it came out here, but. And the picture is really great, but every shot was like a fight with him, and it was too tiring for me.
On a set, do you have a specific approach, a protocol? Because it sounds like in the film, you were very much into exploring the story as you went along. Mm-hmm. But now for those people that are part of your crew, the cinematographer, the actor, you have to, I think, walk this fine line between having structure and also having this sense of freedom. So I'm just curious about how you were able to achieve that on the set.
Well, I think that I chose Christophe Bocard, the DP, because he had the same idea about freedom, and that his experience as a DP gave him the freedom to improvise, and that if we had planned something, if on the set something else happens, then he's ready to change everything, like I'm ready to change everything about directing or about the staging, the actors. And so that's really great to have someone who's on my side, who's not saying, well, we said 2 months ago that we would do a close-up and then a traveling shot. And he's ready to discuss everything at the last moment.
So even though you have a plan, an approach, you're on the set, you're spontaneous, it's evolving, and you adjust as you go along.
Yeah, because very often on the set, I always say that you are only making a documentary at the end, even if you have written a story, you've storyboarded everything. And I think that at one point, you know, if the actor is sick, if it's not the weather that you planned, you have to adjust to what's in front of you, and that you're doing documentary of that. So, for example, when it's snowing in the movie, we were in the apartment and we had only shots to do that were
Exterior?
No, it was inside the apartment of Romain Duris, and it was supposed to be sunny outside. So it was snowing, so we couldn't shoot with the windows, and we couldn't do anything. So because the crew was just staying and waiting for the snow to stop, and it was like it started to snow like for the whole day. So I said to everyone, okay, let's do a scene with the snow instead of waiting for it to stop. And so I created that scene where he doesn't take a coffee because he can't drink coffee. On the balcony, and it became a scene that stayed compared to scenes that I had written and are not in the movie anymore. So it's that kind of things. I think that you can allow yourself when you know your story, because I knew that he was sick, so he can't have coffee, and the scene is very strong because the combination of the coffee and the view of Paris with the snow, it's very strong now in the movie. So it's just something that wasn't planned and that becomes important at the end. At the beginning, I really didn't like studio shooting, and I really believed in the reality of shooting on location, you know, and finding the right location that gave the tone of the shooting. Because if you shoot in an old house, the whole house is going to really give the ambience for the actors, the crew, and it's going to help you make the film. But I think that after 8 movies, I feel more comfortable now in the studio, because after a while, you know what to do with an actor being close to the window or not, and you're always shooting the same kind of things. So if it's fake or not, then you can deal with that. And everything, the apartment of Romain Duris is the interior is only studio. The balcony is a real balcony, and so everything which is inside is studio. And we used it was a studio about that big, and we had like a huge photo of Paris, so that behind the windows it was a digital photography that was huge. So that avoided us to use how do you say, blue screens? Yeah, because he had like huge windows, and the view about Paris was so important. So we used that, and for Mélanie Laurent's apartment also, for Juliette Binoche, just the scene when she brings back Jean at the end. It's also in a studio. So a lot of the interiors were in studio. Well, the thing is, you can't shoot at night in the middle of the sea, so we had to use what we call une nuit américaine, American night.
HMI lights?
How do you?
HMI lights.
It's when you shoot daylight and then
HMI lights.
Okay, yeah. So because it was supposed to be moonlight, you know, it's really something that's hard to shoot a moonlight on a beach, for example, because it's very strong when you see a moonlight when the moon is full. It's really very strong, but you can't really use, you know, a digital camera or a 35mm camera. It doesn't do anything to the film stock. So you really need to invent a way. It's the same thing when you're shooting in a forest. You need to invent a way to light the forest, because at night in a forest, you know, there's no light. So it's always those situations when you need to find a way to do something artificial, making believe it's not artificial. So it was one of the few digital effects, special effects. We used the how do you say, when you do the color balance at the end, and we did the color balance with digital. So we transferred the 35mm onto a digital, and so we really try to create night with a daylight shot. I think that you really make films with films that the others make, you know. So what we call culture is really that when you see paintings, when you watch other movies, when you travel, you know, for example, when I come here and I spend like 6 days in New York, it really helps me to build up other stories. And it's funny how when you make a film, you use everything, you know. So walking around, just, you know, just walking, you know, and looking at people, talking to friends, listening to music. You can use everything to make a movie. So I think that you have to be receptive to anything. So it's true that in my spare time, I can do some very various things where, because I like to be influenced by everything I see. So it can be dance, it can be music, it can be stories that I'm told, books I read. You know, it's so stupid things I see on TV. You know, it's everything can influence you, really.
Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing your time with us and your experience. I'm sure we'll all leave here have a stronger sense of your filmmaking approach, and hopefully finding a way for them to establish their own voices as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.